Howdy, folks. Welcome back to JJ's Library and Readings. I hope y'all's day has been good. I'm uploading a little earlier today, so hopefully we'll just get earlier and earlier so that y'all can have your video hopefully in the afternoon of the day. Hopefully more people will see it. Um, man, I had a stressful day. I have this lawnmower for the house I live at, and the driving belt wanted to disconnect and don't know how it works. Um, so I try to figure it out. I have somewhat of an idea, but you know, projects. Y'all didn't come here for that though. Y'all came here to hopefully relax and hear this book. So, like always, I hope you're in your bed or your couch, got your coffee, smoking your cob, whatever it might be, and I hope you're ready to read this book. Again, we're still reading Between Two Fires, and I still suggest that y'all get your book so you can follow along. Or if the whole point is that y'all just want to listen to me read it, that's cool too. But we're on chapter 4 today. Of the Monastery and of the best wine had in 7 years. They marched together for days, and they saw no people. When the donkey meat spoiled, they ate only green stems, a parsnip she pulled out of the ground, using the end of her dress wrapped around her hand, a grasshopper she managed to catch, and a very little honey. They were making for Paris, though the girl didn't say why. Despite the devil horns he had seen the night before, he thought about abandoning her no less than a dozen times, and to the end he hardly responded to her attempts to speak to him. She had a pretty voice and decent manners, and he would easily feel affection for her if he let himself, but he determined not to, with limited success. "Where were you born?" she asked as they crest a hill under a pleasantly warm blue sky. "Picardy." "What town?" "A town." "A big town?" "Just a town." "With what name?" "Town." "This town?" "Is it near a mountain?" "No." "A hill, then?" "No." "A lake?" "No." "Farms?" "No." All towns are near farms. He scolded at her, but she deflected this with a look of unperturbed precocity. The intelligence in her eyes goaded him, reminding him of someone else, someone who had hurt him. "Then yes," he said. "Near farms?" "Yes." "Good. Now we're getting somewhere." "Trees? Is this town near trees?" "I guess." "I want to revisit the question of the hill, because you didn't seem sure." "Yes, it was near a hill." "But you seem sure about the mountain." "So no mountain?" "No." "In the name?" "Town," I said. "No town is named Town. Mine was Townsville Sir Cuntingtown." "What did your papa do again?" "He was a lawyer." "It shows. Now shut up. You'll never get a wife being so mean." "I already had one." "What happened to her?" "I killed her for talking." The girl giggled at that. "And is she buried in Townsville Sir Town?" "Shut up. I suppose you killed your children too." "All of them." "What was their names?" Boy, girl, and shut up." They saw the monastery on the second day, and only because they went into the woods to forage. They got less than a fistful of sour berries between them, but as they were about to leave, Thomas spotted a hare and chased it down a footpath that led further into the woods. The hare got away, of course, but the woods broke on a small hill, and from the hill he saw the low stone walls and the thatched roof, and what looked like a garden. "Oh, sweet Jesus, let our luck be in," he said, and the two of them went to the gate. It was a simple gate of interwoven sticks standing open. A wooden sign over the gate said burned in Latin, "This gate opens to all who enter in Christ's peace." He drew his sword and went in. She followed behind him, with her hands clasped as if to pray, and then moved past him and headed directly for the little stone church, ignoring his "Oh, wait!" He let her go, shaking his head at her, and then assessed the grounds. It was a small monastery, home to no more than 20 brothers from the look of it, Only the church and the outer walls were stone. The cloisters and dormitory were wattle and dub. Another hare, or the same one, darted from the garden, but Thomas Stephen tried to lunge at it, instead making straight for the earthen cellar where he suspected the buttery would be. It had already been emptied, considerably, respectfully, and quite thoroughly emptied. No luck at all, he said, and suppressed the urge to spit. The dormitory was empty, except for 10 straw beds, several of which bore the stains of plague on them. He backed out quickly. He found the girl kneeling outside the church, praying silently with her clasped hands, her cheeks wet. "Why didn't you go in?" he said. She just looked at him and wiped her cheeks, and then he smelled them. He peeked in the door, waving flies away from his face, and saw 4 puffy corpses lying in the nave, wearing their off-white undyed woolen habits. They were lying on their backs, and the last one, an old man, was curled like a baby near them. He had his eating knife in a hand, and his habit was one on the floor. The floor was sticky under him. He had died trying to burst one of those awful lumps. Flowers were strewn on the lot of them. Cicestricans, Thomas said. Fresh dirt mounds out back covered the first brothers who fell, but only 4. If they had been buried once to a grave, and if all the beds had been filled, a few were unaccounted for, probably those who had emptied the buttery. Maybe they thought that they would go to another abbey. Thomas didn't envy them trying to travel unarmed with the last cart of food in the valley. When the girl finished her prayers, Thomas said, "No food." They got the stores and emptied the fish pond and the dovecot. They had an oven, but it's been cold a long while. The garden where they grew food is all turned up. All they've got is damned herbs and flowers. The girl went to the herb garden and motioned for Thomas to follow. She handed him a bucket from the well and walked him through the garden, filling it with flowers and greens she tore expertly with her small white hands. He started grabbing at everything, but she stopped him before he grabbed one green stem. She took her hand at him urgently. "What? Why?" She used her finger to write Monshud in the dirt. He furrowed his brow to read it, sounding out each letter. Monk should. Poison. "Oh, thank you. So, what, you're not talking?" "Not here." "What, because it's a monkery?" She nodded. "You didn't have a vow." "Yes, I did," she wrote, "by the church in my heart." It was taking him so long to read that she just pointed at the church and placed her hand over her chest. He grunted. "Is this vow for the rest of your life?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just while we're here?" She nodded. "In that case, we're definitely spending the night, maybe a week." She reached into the bucket and threw some damp leaves at his face. One stuck at his forehead, and she laughed in spite of herself and her temporary status as maiden Cistercian. They ate their bucket of greens and bright flowers, along with the buttery little crowns of calendula, which he remembered from his mother's garden. She used to mix it with chicken's grain to make their egg yolks darker, and she said, better for the blood. Thomas kept picking out one broadish leaf, nodding his head as he tasted it. "What's this one?" "Sorrel," she wrote. "It's good, like a lemon, but good. And this?" "Lavage. This?" "Comfrey. This one I know. Didn't eat it all, and get more of it in the morning. If there is more, it's good to pack in a wound to stop bleeding. Yarrow, how do you know all this?" "Mother," she wrote, and a smile broke so gently on her face that Thomas bit his tongue viciously to keep from weeping for his own. They slept in the open air of the cloisters near statues of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, Saint Genevieve of Paris, and the archangels Michael and Gabriel. Thomas woke up in the middle of the night and went to look at his comet. It was across Syngenus' neck now, and seemed to be reddish at the tip, as if were a tiny vein of blood in it. He rubbed his eyes and looked away, but when he looked back, it was still there. He noticed a second comet now, close to it, and very faint. Just kill us all, he said. What are you waiting for? He slept hard after that and dreamed of monks singing bland chant. He woke up in the peach light that came just before sunrise. The air was chilly, and the girl was still sleeping. The air smelled of juniper, though he saw no juniper bush. It also smelled of wildflowers. Both of them had been covered in flowers. They met travelers the next day, a cloth merchant from Bruges, his family, and two Flemish men at arms with 5 horses between them. All seemed to be in good health. Thomas would have been glad to meet them 2 months before, with Godefroy and his band of killers behind him. The horses were young, the cart promised excellent pickings, and Godefroy would not have raped this woman. The two parties stayed 50 paces apart, and Thomas and the merchant each shouted news about what lay behind him. The news was not good in either direction. Then the man offered to buy food. Thomas said he had none to spare, and would have said the same had the girl's sack been full of sausages and peas. Money wasn't what it used to be. The merchant looked at the sack. The older of the two Flemings suddenly looked nervous, and Thomas guessed that he was afraid the merchant might order them to search the sack. Neither man wanted to tangle with Thomas. The merchant, who was in fact assessing Thomas, finished this, saluted him, and moved his party on. The bridge Thomas wanted to cross was said to be just on the other side of a river town called Saint Martin le Preux. But as he and the girl approached the town, they came to an overturned and wheelless handcart, on the bottom of which someone who was not a confident speller had painted, in what looked like blood, "Go back." As this was the only bridge they knew of, they continued forward. Although Thomas traded his straw hat for the helmet and carried the sword naked across his shoulders, the girl took her bird whistle out, poured a little of water in it, and began to make bird song. "Stop that," he hissed. "I just don't want to surprise anyone, and I thought this would let them know we're friendly." "I'm not friendly, but I'm friendly, and I'm the one with the whistle." He was just about to take it from her when a priest walked out to meet them, easily visible in his white linen alb, holding in his hands a horn lantern. It was still light enough to see, but the priest kept the lantern near his nose and mouth. He came from a hidden recess in the woods near which the skulls of animals had been nailed to trees. "Stop, please," the priest said, holding up one very delicate-looking hand. Thomas was glad to keep his distance. He turned his head to the left and right to make sure nobody was moving on their flanks. The priest now looked to the left and right as well, wondering if the soldier had Confederates skirting up the sides. "You don't have to be afraid," the girl called out to the priest, but Thomas pinched her arm. "Speak when I tell you to," he told her. Then he called to the priest. "We're not sick." "Do you promise?" he said. "On my word," Thomas said. "Are you alone?" "Oh, yes, quite alone." The priest lowered his lantern. "I'm not sick either. We saw your sign." "Sign? Go back?" "Ah, that would have been the militia. Where are they?" "As I was their confessor, I fear they probably bypassed purgatory on their way straight to the cauldron. Dead? Some time ago." "We just want to cross the bridge." "That's problematic." "Why? There's no toll, is there?" "There's no bridge." "When was the last time you had wine? And I mean good wine." Thomas smiled broadly, showing teeth in surprisingly good shape for his age. Teeth he would be very glad to stain purple. The people in the town near the river had burned the bridge to try to isolate themselves, but the death was on both sides and found them anyway. A peddler had paid a farmer to sleep in his barn, against the order of the seigneur, but the next morning the farmer found him there with his face frozen in pain and fear, and milk from the hoard baboose staining the pits of his shirt. The farmer had 7 children, who worked and played in the fields with neighbor children and helped out the widow's alehouse. Soon all the families on the east side of the town were stricken, along with the widow. The die off started as it always did, and with those who were good enough to minister to the sick and bury the dead, with those who gathered the alehouse including the militia. When the churchyard was full, families dumped the bodies in the river and the eels fed on them. Then something else moved in that also liked to eat what the eels grew fat on. Fishermen who speared or cast nets for trout, eels, and pike began to disappear, even though they went in groups of 2 or 3. Nobody knew what was happening until a young boy sprinted back to town and said that his father and uncle had been eaten by a great black fish or snake, and with a fat mouth that hid in the murky shallows. It was lashed at them with the end of its tail and pulled the men in, then tore them with spines, and then its great froggy mouth had opened and clamped down on their heads, swallowing each of them whole in several fast gulps. The boy had stood transfixed until he saw that it was slithering up the bank towards him, and then he had run screaming for the road. The monster would have caught him, but his panicked flight had startled his uncle's mule, still tied to its cart, causing it to buck and catch the thing's attention. It wanted the mule more than the boy, so it coiled all around the poor animal and bit its head off, dragging the body, cart, and all back down to the bank and into the river. How long was it, boy? The priest had said. I don't know. Think. You saw it take the mule, so of course it was larger than a mule. As long as 3 mules, perhaps. The boy shook his head. How many, then? The boy held up 8 fingers, then corrected it to 9. Several of the men in the town who were still healthy and still brave enough to leave their house met up at the alehouse and drank until they had the stomach to go down to the river and look for it. They took their axes and wooden flails, their clubs and scythes, and they swore to St. Martin and Michael and Dennis to cleave the thing in two or die in the attempt. The priest who drank with them witnessed these oaths and agreed to come with them and to hold over the men his processional crozier with its agonized Christ. All their boozy courage left them when they went to the banks and saw the wreckage of the cart and the piles of shit the thing had left on the bank, all full of boots and bones and broken tools, and even the shredded cuirass of a man eaten arms, or a man at arms. Even with the bridge down, it seemed some were trying to cross the river, but they were not making it to the far shore. This is beyond our power, brethren, said the priest. God forgave us the oaths we make in ignorance. Let us return to town before we make the thing stronger on our fat and our blood. None of them protested. What about the signor? I think that's what that word is. I've been butchering it this whole time, like I said I would, but I think it's signor. I'll have to look it up. Asked Thomas, leaning towards the priest over his modest table. If he's well enough to issue orders about letting in strangers, he should have enough spunk to buckle on his armor and put a sword in that thing. The priest smiled his distinctive, sad smile, making the well-used lines around his eyes deepen. He was probably a year or 2 older than Thomas, but drink and soft living made him look closer to 50 than 40. Faded freckles of wine on the chest of his alb, only muted by his attempts to clean them, testified to the death of the town laundress. Despite his woolly eyebrows and masculine chin, there was something womanish, almost wifely, about the cleric's aspect. Our lord is what you might call a frightened cunt. If no more generous term occurred to you, he has shut himself and his return to the tower. His herald comes down on Fridays and reads his proclamations, which are ignored. He never gets off his horse. A man confessed to me that he intends to throw a slop pot at the herald the next time he comes, and asked me to pardon him in advance. I told him that the jester would put him one slop pot closer to heaven. Better the herald should get a face full of shit tomorrow than that axe handle across the noose next week. That's where things are headed. We starve down here, unable to even pull fish from the river now, while our master has the watermill and ovens and has hoarded back again grain to keep himself fed until doomsday. So a week's worth then? The priest laughed and went to pat Thomas's arm in fellowship, but Thomas pulled his mailed arm back with the sound of money being withdrawn from a card game. He waved a cautionary finger, but was still laughing, as was the priest. The priest noticed the salt stains on the knight's dark garments and the rust stains on his light ones. Had he had a page and a squire, a wife, or had he been this dirty before the death came? Who is this girl to you? Asked the priest, gesturing where the girl lay asleep on a straw pallet. And don't you say your daughter? I don't know who she is, but she sleeps a lot. Maybe she's hoping to wake up from this bad dream. If so, she's smarter than both of us. I don't know what smart is anymore. More wine? With pleasure. Good, isn't it? The best. Black as a woman's heart and sweet as her, yes, the priest said amused, other heart. The priest tipped the small cask of wine so that the last of the pretty red liquids spattered out of it into the serving jug. The wine is from Beaumont, but it comes via Avignon, from the private stock of His Holiness. But how? Where my younger brother is a steward of sorts, one of those who dresses His Holiness, or was. His office now is less formal, but still a very handsome younger brother, 8 years my junior, but seems younger still. A certain cardinal is fond of masculine beauty, but this pope is known for his generosity, even when it comes to vices he does not share. Ah, indeed, Thomas laughed. So you drink the fruit of your brother's damnation? Just the one barrel. I believe God has it within his heart to overlook my overlooking. You had only one barrel of this? Why drain it tonight? Why not? The desire came on me suddenly. It's the last wine in town. I should have used it up at Mass, but there is neither wafer nor bread to go with it. I think the monks who made my wafers are all dead. Cistercians? Half a day from here? Yes, the priest said hopefully. They're dead. A few may have fled. Ah, the priest said. His Adam's apple bobbled as he swallowed hard twice, and his eyes moistened. He nodded. He looked as if he wanted to reach out for Thomas's hand, but didn't. Anyway, nobody's comes now. I haven't even been in the church in 2 weeks. I'm as scared to go there as they are. If you don't go to church, how do you know they don't go looking for you? The priest looked down at his hands where his fingers were grabbing each other. They know where I live. Some still come from confession. They shout their sins from the path, and I shout back their penance from my window. Even though that's been nearly a week. No more Mass in any event, and the wine may serve a holier purpose in your belly. Oh? I was hoping a cup or two might extract some knightly oath from you. You are a knight, or were? I was. I still am, I suppose. But it feels more like I was. Feels like a long time ago. You could be one again. I doubt it. I have done things. Things? I was cheated of my holdings. The English? Thomas shook his head. Worse, Norman. The Comte de Verex, who treated with the English, who treated with the English after our loss of Circe. My keep was near Grievous. I, despaired of justice, I took to the road and lived by the strength of my arm. I sought out even worse men than myself. I went revenge on him. I still do. Thomas fell silent. Do you want to make a confession? No. Not to me, eh? I just don't want to. I wouldn't blame you if it was me. No, there's no point. Kill the abomination in the river and God will make you a knight again. I'd rather he got me another goblet of this. No, the priest said. You wouldn't rather a goblet of wine than your honor back. Your joking is pleasant, but it doesn't hide the hole in you. Thomas turned his eyes away from the priest's warm gaze. He only just managed not to cry. He did this by angering himself at God for making him suffer and pay for sins he had been backed into. God ringed you around with hounds and cornered you, then speared you with your back against a tree. When Thomas spoke, he turned down the corners of his mouth, and his words came out as a quiet growl. I'll kill the whoring thing. How exciting! So we're gonna find a beast in a next to a river or in the river, wherever it may be. I like that chapter. I think that was probably my favorite so far. I know sometimes I can grow monotone while reading, but I'm really trying not to butcher every words. I swear I know how to read. That's the whole reason I made this channel, but you know, I think I'm nervous. I also haven't read to anybody in a long time, so but I hope you're enjoying the story at least getting what's happening and stuff like that. Um Apparently the author Christopher, he was the same guy who made shoot, what's that book called? Something the Fly, Lord of the Flies, which is again one of my favorite books, but I really like this book. I've been getting into medieval stuff. But either way, I appreciate y'all's patience and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope y'all get some great sleep tonight. Until next time, which should be tomorrow. I'll see you then.